Hello. Today I wanted to talk to you about a few things. The overlying topic is this piece where, we have to own responsibility for the things that we do, and yet we don't want to drive all of those things into shame. So there's a big difference between guilt and shame, and that's one of the topics I want to talk about today. So, for guilt and shame, guilt is that you feel bad about something that you did or said, some action or maybe inaction. Shame is when you make it about who you are. So, for example, guilt could be I handed in my term paper late, right? I feel bad about that. Shame is I'm an awful person because I can't do anything right, and that's why I turned in my term paper late. Whatever that thing is for you, that term paper is for you, that's the difference between shame and guilt. So we try to keep things out of the shame category for many reasons, and we'll go into those later. But I wanted to first talk about, we have to get to the core of this, right? So intent versus impact. This is a huge topic all on its own, and I'm sure someday I'll make a huge training just about intent and impact. So even if we make the best decisions possible, there's always an impact, and usually an impact that we don't intend, and doesn't make us feel so good. So we could make a decision as a parent, as a boss, or I mean, even just in a relationship where we think we're doing the best thing possible, and the other person or other people don't necessarily feel the impact is matching the intent. So the impact may be awful for them. It may be awful for ourselves. And there's always pros and cons to every decision that we make. So we're always going to feel that impact, and we're always going to have made that impact, whether or not we were conscious that that impact would be made or not. It doesn't mean that we meant to make that impact, right? Sometimes we have to cut some losses in order to have the better decision. So it doesn't mean that we've done anything wrong necessarily. It does still mean that if we own our responsibility, we're keeping it out of shame. We're keeping that awareness in front of us. So if we can be aware of the impact that it had on others, that's keeping it in the light. That means that, okay, the thing I did, maybe that decision wasn't the greatest for everyone, or maybe it was, and these were additional impacts maybe I could have thought about, or I knew were going to happen, and that's just part of the decision. So it's keeping it out of shame because you're aware and conscious of that. Now, when we choose instead to kind of hide those things or pretend like they didn't happen, we're keeping those things in the dark. So they do become about who we are because we haven't worked through those things to bring them out of shame and into guilt. So intent versus impact, we're always going to have impacts, often impacts that we did not intend, often impacts that we don't like. And the big thing is about owning up to that, right? It can be both and. It can be I made the best decision and it had impact. Those are not exclusive. Often, most decisions include both of those. Whatever decision we make has some type of impact, whether it's on ourselves or someone else. So I just want us to really look at that. What was our intent and what was our impact? And it's one way that we learn our lessons so that we don't have to repeat some of the silly ones over and over again. And I also want to talk about how we keep those things out of shame. So there's 3 reasons why these things are not shameful when we make mistakes, okay? So the first thing is I want you to know that you are adopted into the world of mistake makers because you're human. If you're listening to this, if you understand it, chances are you're human, you're going to make mistakes. We have to learn how to own the responsibility of that. Okay, how did it impact you? Is there anything I can do to make that impact less? How can I what can I trade for you? What act of service can I do for you? Because I hear that the impact was maybe not what I wanted or something I really couldn't avoid. So we're human, we make mistakes. And so all we need to do is own up to that, or own up to the impact, even if we didn't make a mistake. Often we did the right thing and still there's an impact. We want to care for those relationships. So the second thing is that not only are we human and we make mistakes, but by making mistakes and owning the responsibility for those mistakes, we're also inviting others to be okay with their mistakes, to own up to their responsibility. Because how are we really going to change as human beings if we don't see some of the ways we could grow or do better in the future if we don't hear the impact and if we don't take responsibility for the impact? And then also it creates clear relationships. If you can own what is yours and say, hey, I'm human, I made this mistake, I'm really sorry, what act of service can I do to make it up to you? People are more willing to trust you than you saying, well, I made the best decision and that's just that. People want to know that we're caring about each other, and the way we do that is saying, okay, so I'm sorry that this impacted you, how can I do better? And really not dismiss the other person's perspective. Everybody's got their own perspectives about a situation, and you aren't going to hear the impacts if you don't listen to their perspective. So really own the consequences of the choices that you make. Feel free to, connect with those people that had impact, whether it's good or bad. Celebrate with the people who had positive impacts, and then really hear and listen to the impact that you had on maybe not so pleasant situations. So those impacts are really, really going to help you not only become a better person, but a more humble and trusted person, because people will trust you if you say, hey, I made a mistake. This is how I'm trying to fix it. Or, hey, I made this decision and I know it wasn't the best, and what can I do to help the impact? So that's the huge thing between owning responsibility and adding it to your shame. If you keep that mistake or that choice or the impact, whatever part, that you would normally want to hide away and not look at, if you keep that in light, that keeps it out of shame, and that just creates the guilt, which you can get over. You can forgive yourself for doing small acts. It's a lot easier than forgiving yourself for who you are. So just remember that when we own responsibility for the impacts of our choices or the intent that we had, that we often keep that stuff out of shame, and it becomes less anxious for us. It becomes less about who we are and just how we can do better. So I hope that helps, and y'all have a great day. Bye.